Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Ozcast. The Mental Health Show with Mark Aiston.
We are predominantly a face-to-face training organisation, so we haven't been very busy in that area, but we've been extremely busy in doing things online, a lot of online courses, a lot of Zoom meetings with people, and a lot of people calling us and utilising our facilities over the phone and through email and that sort of thing. So, yeah, very busy.
Yeah, that's good. Good. Well, I say it's good, it's bad in a way, as you let me rephrase that. We need to be teaching people how to look after their staff, so that's a good thing. What we don't want is we don't want a lot of people with mental health issues. Since I last spoke to you, what's your gut feel? Do you think things have intensified in that area?
Yeah, look, out here in the battlefields, there's a lot of anxiety that's building. A lot of people seem to have a good sense of themselves and are holding themselves together at the moment, but we're starting to see that hasn't been a good thing. As people, deal with the adrenaline of a situation and the shock of it, quite often they can just manage their way through, but it's when the period starts to change, as it is now with the restrictions easing, that people start to lose that little bit of an adrenaline within themselves. And what we've seen, especially in the last week or so, is a lot more people contacting us and wanting to have a chat about things, wanting to talk about how things are going in their lives because they're feeling within themselves not as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned a very interesting word there, shock. I hadn't thought of it that way. Maybe a lot of people are suffering shock as a result of what has happened.
Yeah, we would say there's a lot of people out there living with a situation that's unavoidable. We try to avoid suffering. It tends to say to the person, you have to feel bad about this, whereas if we use the term living with, it tends to say to the person, everybody's living with this, how are you living with it? So what we see is, a lot of people at the very beginning, when things were getting out of control quite quickly for a lot of people, perhaps they were losing their job or perhaps they were being told to go home and work and having to change all their routines. It was quite a significant sort of change in everybody's lives, and everybody's internal mechanisms seem to have turned on, and people were able to cope and push themselves through. You being a sports journalist will be very familiar with the fact that, footballers, people in a lot of sports can push themselves through adversity. And, most people have that within them. But now as things are quieting down and as things are starting to turn around, we're certainly we're certainly seeing a lot, and we're certainly having people come to us and they're asking a whole range of different questions about their experiences and how they're feeling because they've got the time to do it now.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that as well, because you would think that as we start to come out of this, people's anxiety levels would go down, but certainly through this first phase, what you're indicating, David, is for some people anyway, the anxiety level is increasing.
Yeah, look, I would say the actual level of anxiety probably hasn't changed much, but people's ability to deal with it is different.
Yes.
So, again, when somebody's given a real shock or a real grunt against their system, quite often as humans we just steel ourselves and we go, this is going to be quite difficult, but I can punch through this. I can deal with that initial thing. But then as those things leave our system, that's when we tend to have trouble. And I have a son who lives with an anxiety disorder, and 2 or 3 weeks ago, talking to him over the phone or over Zoom, he was quite good, and he said, I can feel that I'm going to be okay, but just in the last week or two, he said, it's not feeling as good.
That's interesting.
I'm having more difficulties.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those things where he's not a very mature person. He's in his late 20s, and he's got a good understanding of himself and how his feelings react to different things going on in the world. And, he's got a good support system around him, but not everybody is blessed with that. And certainly I was talking to a lady today who lives with bipolar, and she's, just in the last, 4 or 5 days, it's got very, very difficult for her. In that, she's having to gather the wagons, as she called it this morning, circle the wagons a bit around her and gather the people that she knows are her supports, and really put a lot of pre-thought every day into how am I going to get through this day, given I know what's coming.
Good
she is in a privileged position to be able to do that, and my son is as well, having good support networks. But we also know there's a lot of people out there who don't have really good support networks, and that's why we as an organisation have put things into place to try and help those people.
You alluded to it, loneliness. What sort of connect does loneliness have with anxiety, particularly during times like this? I guess I've probably answered my question, but yeah.
Yeah. So one of the key things for all mental illnesses, and one of the key descriptors that most people with a mental illness will tell you, is they feel alone. They feel isolated. Their mind is telling them that they don't deserve any help, or they've done this to themselves, or there's nobody who feels the same as they do, and it's very, very isolating. It's one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking to people about when we're training, that mental illnesses, just by their very nature, isolate people, make you feel alone. Yeah. And that's one of the things that we really battle hard against. We're out there in the trenches, putting ourselves against that every day with the things we do. We're giving people the tools to intervene in an early onset way, in a first aid capacity, and then, a whole range of other things we do help people cope with their feelings, before, during and after mental health incidents. Yeah. Because, mental illness is not something that just happens once on a day and then you're over it. Mental illness is something that you need to be practiced at dealing with.
Being disconnected, is that the same as being lonely?
Look, we've talked a lot about that over the last few weeks with social isolation versus social networking. Now, what we've tried to instigate in our company is physical isolation with social networking.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Because the two things are not the same.
No.
Being isolated is not the same as being lonely. My son, I know, because I've been part of his team over the last 3 or 4 weeks, has been able to socially network, to talk through his feelings. He's even, during this period, been able to change doctors. And, that's a really difficult thing for a person with anxiety, to change their physician. It's not an easy thing to do at all, but because he's got good social support networks around him, he can do that. So we tend to talk about social networking and physical isolation. And you can be physically isolated, which can be quite lonely. I'm sitting here in my office right now, all alone, but I don't feel lonely because I know I've got you on the end of the phone. I've got a sister who, is just a phone call away who can support me, and so on. So it's a matter of being connected, even though you may be physically isolated.
I just want to go back to a point you made and maybe explore a little bit more. You made the point, and I can really relate to this, not me personally, but someone I know. People who are and do suffer anxiety find it very difficult to change doctors. Why is that, do you think, David?
Yeah, look, when you are living with a mental illness like anxiety, and I can only speak from my personal experience, and everybody's experience is going to be different, but my personal experience of people with anxiety, like my son and other people that I help through their lives every day, is that just the act of going and seeing a professional creates anxiety feelings.
Yep.
Now, for me, as a person who doesn't have anxiety, if I have to go to the doctor about a major problem that I'm having, I feel a little bit concerned about that.
Of course, it's normal.
But I know that I'm doing the right thing for myself. But if you're living with an anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder and you already feel alone, your illness is making you feel like you don't deserve things, perhaps you're feeling down on yourself, then just the act of contacting a professional person and saying, this is how I'm feeling, makes you feel more anxious.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
So it tends to prevent you from taking that next step and actually going and finding the professional that can help you. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing in our courses is training people who have these disorders, and a lot of people who don't, how to help themselves or help others to know that you're not alone. And there are people that will understand you. Yeah. For instance, my son, he wouldn't go and see a professional for a long time because he thought, if I go and see a doctor, they're just going to give me a pill and I don't want to take pills. And I heard this from another lady last Friday. I don't want to take pills. But when I said to him and I said to her last Friday, did you know that the best treatment for your condition is not pills? So the likelihood of you being forced to take a pill is pretty low. They go, oh, no, I thought I'd have to take pills. Well, no, you won't. So if you find the right professional to help you, and if you see a professional and they say, I think you should take these tablets and you don't want to, say, no, I don't want to, and I'll go and find another professional and find some help.
Yeah, you've explained that well. Look, I know we've digressed, but I'm fascinated by this, and I'm not sure whether you can answer this question, David, but I'll ask it anyway. Just in terms of tablets and prescription drugs and stuff like that, is there these days, when you go to a doctor and you discuss getting on some sort of antidepressant, is the likelihood of you getting the right one reasonably high these days? Or if you've been on one and you want to change it, is the likelihood of when you do change it that you will improve? Are those numbers higher now because there's a little bit more data, maybe, I don't know, in the discussion points between the doctor and the patient, or is it still a bit hit and miss?
Yeah, look, you're right to answer to ask the question, and unfortunately the answer is yes and no. And I know that's not going to be comforting to you and to your listeners, and that's unfortunate. But this is the situation as best as I can describe it. If I live with depression and I get to the point of saying, yes, I'm going to need some help, and I get to the GP and they recommend a psychiatrist and I am recommended by that psychiatrist, this tablet will be where we're going to start.
Yes.
And it is only a start, because what that psychiatrist is doing is they're doing a differential diagnosis of your symptoms and saying you've got this symptom, that symptom, this symptom, that symptom, and that all adds up to a score of, we think you might have this level of depression.
Gotcha.
The best treatment is some exercise, some CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, some thought therapy, some education about your illness, and we also recommend as part of that you take these drugs. And what the doctor will do, the psychiatrist, is he'll pick the drug that is known to work with the most amount of people with those symptoms.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Now, that might be, as it was for my sister, she started taking those tablets and it did work for her and it improved her mood just enough. Didn't make her go from 10 to 100, but it made her go from 10 to 25% feeling well to the point where she could help herself.
Yes, gotcha. Yeah.
Or it might be a drug that doesn't work for you, and then you're going to have to go off of that drug and start on the next one. And that's not because the doctor's done anything wrong. He's doing the best he can with the information he's got. It's one of the things that a lot of people have trouble understanding, and what we tend to say is, think of it like this. Up until 50, 60 years ago, all medicine was part of the arts department of a university.
Is that right?
Yeah. Now, if you go and you do arthritic surgery or orthopaedic surgery, so you're operating on people's bones, you'll go to a medical learning centre to do that, and that'll be part of the science department. But mental health is still considered an art because it's differential diagnosis.
Yeah. Well explained. Just as an extension to that, are we at the stage where there are scans available on one's brains that can pinpoint whether you've got anxiety, whether you've got bipolar, whether you've got mild depression, and therefore then there would be a more accurate way of prescribing drugs?
And the answer to that question, unfortunately, is no. And this is where mental health needs specialist people with specialist training to identify through differential diagnosis what's actually going on. Wouldn't it be lovely, wouldn't it be absolutely fantastic if we could just go to the doctor and say, I'm feeling a bit like this, they took some blood or did a scan and said, right, you've got depression number 3.6.
Absolutely.
Take this pill, talk to people like this, you'll be better in a month. That would be wonderful, but that is not the case.
Do you think that's possible?
There is no scan.
Do you think that's possible, David?
I'm not a medical researcher, so I don't know.
I guess the question is it physiologically possible?
Again, I don't know. I don't have enough information to even make a guess at that. I know there's an awful lot of money being spent on research, so if it is possible, I would say that humans have the capacity to make it possible. But is it possible? I don't know.
Not
Possibility has to be proven, and at the moment it's not.
Now, I know we might have touched on this earlier, but just tell us a little bit about your aftercare.
Yeah, so as I was saying before, one of the things that we find with mental illness is that people get very, very isolated. It's a combination of physical isolation, mental isolation. They isolate themselves through necessity. It's very, very difficult to deal with a lot of others if you're feeling really unwell yourself. It's overwhelming sometimes. So mental health can be very isolating, and not only be isolating for the person with the illness, but it can be isolating for their families and friends. So it's part of what we do in every course and everything that we do. We offer an exclusive system through our company called Aftercare. Now, Aftercare starts with what we do right when we first meet people, and we give them the opportunity to tell us everything that they can about them, so that we can then give them the best experience through the training that we can. And then we follow up regularly with everybody we meet. Every single person we meet, we follow up a minimum of 5 times in the year post their course.
Wow.
We ring a minimum of 20% of the people that we meet and have a personal conversation with them about how they're going. And every single person who graduates from a course with us gets given an aftercare card, and that aftercare card contains our principal trainer's personal phone number and email address, our secondary trainer's personal email address and phone number, and my personal email address and phone number. And we say to everybody who graduates from a course from us, as a graduate of one of our courses, you're entitled to our aftercare warranty, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from this point forward, if you need advice or help with a mental health issue, you can get that from us.
Wow.
Now, we give everybody a stack of other resources to go away with, and one of the problems that we do find, Mark, is that a lot of people really, really care about people, and they want them to live well, and they want their communities to be stronger and live well with their mental illnesses, but they just don't know what's available out there.
No, of course
I've lost track of the amount of times that people say to me, why didn't I know about this phone number? Why didn't I know about this group of helpers that is out there? And the answer is you just didn't know.
No.
So we give them all those resources, but we also give them follow-up. We never let them go. We give them follow-up, we ring them, we email them, we find out how they're going, and we give them the opportunity to ring or email us at any time for any issue so that people don't feel alone.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful, and so important. So important. What's the website again?
Yeah, so the website is www.mentalhealthpartners, there's an S on the end, .com.au. Anybody can find anything they want about us on that website. We have courses designed from 20 minutes all the way up to 14 to 15 hours at a time, and from 5 years old to 105.
Wow.
So anybody in our community who's got any interest in finding out more about mental health issues or resilience or well-being can find something that's going to suit them.
Wonderful. And I know we spoke about this a while back about offering, the services out into the country and stuff like that, into the country of South Australia I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Is that where you're heading, or do you have customers all over the state?
Yeah, we have customers all over South Australia and nationally. So before the virus hit, we spent significant time in Port Pirie, and we were in Port Augusta just before that. I've just taken a booking for Renmark and several bookings for Ceduna and Port Lincoln, and where else are we going? We're going to... I can't remember the name of the town, but anyway, somewhere down south. We've got a trainer who does all of the Limestone Coast and right down through to Mount Gambier for us. We've got trainers in Sydney and the Gold Coast. We're here, there and everywhere. I was just talking to one of our clients in Sydney half an hour before I started speaking to you.
Yeah. Well, you're doing some great work all over the place, David. It's wonderful. Good to talk to you. Very educational. I know we drifted off course there a bit, but I think it was really good that we did, because you offered some really good advice and information, and I think that's what people want. And I think probably the most important thing that we discussed was the fact that, you're not alone. That's very important, isn't it, that we push that point?
That is, people are not alone. There's a lot of people out there who think that way, but they're not. And, if I can get out there and tell another person tomorrow that they're not alone, then my job is done. Yeah,
and I know that we have Are You OK Day once a year, but really that should be every day, every minute of the day, really, shouldn't it?
Yeah, we do a lot of work with the people who instigated Are You OK Day. We're doing a specialist program with them into a few groups. We're working with Bipolar Australia at the moment to develop a system with them, because bipolar is one of those illnesses, and one of our trainers who we brought on last year lives with bipolar, and that is a very, very isolating illness. You feel absolutely alone. The illness itself really does push you to just being you, and it makes you think that there's nobody else like you.
Just briefly, I know we're about to wrap up. Just briefly, I need to ask this. What is the difference between depression and bipolar? If someone is a manic depressant, they're this, but if you suffer bipolar, what is the fundamental difference, David?
Yeah, so depression is an illness that is typified by very, very low mood and lack of interest in regular activities.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And those two things must be present, and they don't go away at all for a minimum of 2 weeks. So very low mood and lack of interest in regular activities.
Yes.
Must be present, doesn't go away at all for a minimum of 2 weeks. Now, bipolar, what used to be called manic depression, is a component of depression. So a person will have a very low mood, but then they can very quickly, or sometime over a period of days, cycle into a very, very high mood.
Oh, gotcha.
And then they'll dive back down into a very low mood. So a person that most people would recognise the name of and recognise the symptoms in was Robin Williams. He was very, very honest with the fact that he had bipolar type 1, very, very, very low moods, but very, very, very high moods as well. Yeah. And he liked his high moods
unnaturally,
so much.
Unnaturally high, David? Like, in other words, if you saw someone in that high mood, would you think this is a bit over the top? Or
Yeah, so what those very, very high moods are typified by are unrealistic expectations of themselves. They are the king of the world, they control everything. Every decision they make is going to turn into fields of gold.
Yeah, gotcha.
I had a person in my family who had bipolar type 1. When he was in his very, very, very high moods, it was nothing for him to spend thousands and thousands of dollars that he just didn't have. Because in that very high mood, he knew it was going to be fine.
Yeah.
Now, it never was fine, but
it's fascinating.
The mood makes you believe that you're Superman. That it's going to be okay. So that's the difference. The main difference between bipolar and depression. Depression, low mood, not feeling like you can take part in normal activities, and that doesn't ever go away. Bipolar, some depression like that, but then switches to higher mood.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Well described. David, thank you. Much appreciated.
My absolute pleasure.
We'll talk soon. I love having you on the program. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. No worries.
Good to talk, David.
Thanks for the time, Mark. Really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.